What is happening, Chicago Bears fans? This is T Formation Conversation. I'm your host, Lester Wiltfong, and I have had to bring my guy in, good doctor, Dr. Mason West, because the Bears injury report is massive. There's been a couple guys slapped on IR this week. So, I know you're all already listening to his bare bones on Thursday night, but now it's official. I just want to make sure we have a chance to talk to him. So Mason, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. It was lucky I got to go play some basketball this morning. So I'm feeling excited. I got the competitive juices flowing, and even though it's dreary outside, it's fuzzy and warm in here.
I sent you a text yesterday. I said, "Hey, are you free tomorrow morning? Not too early. I don't want to make mess up your day." And you're like, "Oh, I'm up at 6 playing basketball." Like, oh my God, I remember those days. There was time in my younger years where the early morning, the YMCA or the church leagues, whatever it was, had those really early gyms. So that was fun. Did you play full court when you go out there? Or just kind of more just shoot around stuff?
Yeah, if we can get 5-on-5, we'll play full court. North Suburban YMCA, if anyone's trying to get some good games in, got some guest passes. And then, obviously, every time someone gets hurt because there's people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s who are not warming up right and all that. So then if that happens, we switch to short court. So we still get some fun games going.
All right, right on. So let's just jump into this. The injury report is one thing, but let's talk about the guys they put on injury reserve.
Yeah.
Khalil Herbert, running back. We saw the injury on Thursday night, a couple Thursdays ago. A little short pass, kind of had to twist himself. You saw that ankle. Of course, he's a high ankle sprain. And of course, as Bears fans, we know high ankle sprain. That's the bad one. They waited all week to put him on IR. High ankle sprain, man, that's 4 week, but that could be longer, right? I mean, there's no guarantee he'll be back after 4 games, is there?
I mean, if you look statistically, the average for NFL players to return from a high ankle sprain is 11 weeks. And that's the average, right? So you probably got some outliers on the far end, you got some outliers on the short end. You tend to sit in that 4 to 6 week window for that moderate high ankle sprain. It really just depends on the severity of it, right? Is it grade 2 or grade 3? I actually had put out there right after it happened, when you have that massive, we'd say dorsiflexion, right? The foot pointing down and all that weight, that talus bone gets shoved up between the fibula and the tibia, pushing them apart, and you sprain that syndesmosis. And the reason why it takes longer to come back from something like a high ankle than your traditional lateral ankle sprain is because every time you put weight down in that foot now, that talus bone, it keeps pushing up into that space, and over, right? You're just pushing those two bones out. So that's why it takes a bit longer. Now, can you do things to speed up the recovery? Absolutely. I'm hoping and thinking that that's what he's doing over these next 4 weeks while he's on here. And at the end, there are some external things you can use to reduce the amount of forces being put between those two bones on that syndesmosis. But, I wouldn't be surprised if the 4 weeks pass and he needs a couple more here and there. It just depends specifically on what his grade is.
Okay, so we're talking high ankle sprain. That's something, I know they talked about after the injury. They wanted to wait till the swelling to reduce a little bit. Is that something where they got to go in and X-ray, make sure nothing's broken, MRI, make sure there's no ligament damage? I mean, if there was severe stuff, obviously it's a little something different with the surgery, but just high ankle sprain, I guess if we're thinking in best case scenario, it's better than having something like severe, but still the possibility he'd be out for a little while is rough. But and then, of course, D'Onta Foreman has been kind of just sitting there, right? He's there for like a few weeks, not playing. He was outstanding last year for Carolina Panthers. I've talked about it often. I had him on one of my fantasy teams, so I'm very aware of the stretch, how hot Foreman got towards the end of the season. So I like Herbert. He's an explosive player. Foreman's not that. But I don't think the Bears running game's going to miss too much by having Foreman in there. They still at least have a guy they can hammer a defense with.
Well, and Foreman is just, unfortunately, a victim of timing, right? Because you have free agency first, so that he gets signed. And the thought process, I would believe, was to have Herbert and Foreman, boom, boom, your 1-2 punch. And then the Bears had Roschon Johnson fall into their lap in the draft, whether it's a cost issue, whether it's just because they think that Roschon can do a little bit more across the board, third down back, etc. Foreman just became the odd man out, and unfortunately, he doesn't bring special teams value. So that's why you have a guy like, who was also on the injury report, the Homer, who was getting more of those special teams reps, maybe some third downs here and there. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the Bears running tackle really shouldn't miss a beat with him in there. He ran for 1,000 yards last year, and that wasn't even on a full year because they had to wait for Christian McCaffrey to get out of there. Darrington Evans was the one that was brought up, stolen off the Dolphins practice squad, and he was here last year, so he knows what's going on. So it should be fine, honestly. I mean, he's not quite as explosive as Herbert is, but it should still be a solid running game.
Yeah, I like his game. He's a good football player. Also going on IR this week was Equinemius St. Brown, and I don't recall him getting injured in the game on Thursday, but obviously something there that was like a hamstring, I believe is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So, injury reserve for a hamstring, you don't want to see it because some players can kind of get through it. That tells you it was a little more severe. Since he was put on IR, we're talking a minimum of 4 games. So in your expertise, do you think that's something that after 4 weeks can come off, or you think that it may linger? I mean, obviously it's hamstring, so these tend to linger, but the fact that he went on IR makes me a little nervous as a Bears fan. Like, okay, because he's not a stud receiver, but he's another good football player.
Yeah, I mean, you could play that game of what really happened with the Bears' offense. Is it circumstance that Claypool leaves and Equinemius St. Brown comes in,
Yeah.
or is it just simply like the offense got better because they started calling different plays, more 12 personnel, all that jazz? But you're seeing that a lot, and that's the thing that sucks about Thursday Night Football, right? Short week, you're playing again. It's a quick turnaround, hard on especially soft tissue injuries. I mean, we saw if you look at the list, there's so many hamstrings there. But, a good example of that is Greg Dulcich, who was on IR for the Broncos, came off and re-aggravated his hamstring literally on that Thursday night game earlier this week. And that's what it happens with hamstring. It's so finicky. It's a muscle that you need concentric control, strength. You need eccentric control. It depends, again, just like kind of with the ankle stuff. What's the grade? If it's a 1, 2, 4 weeks, no problem. If it's closer in that 3 range, if you weren't, we can talk about nutrition with that. Like, what's your hydration like? What's your nutrition like? So do you have the building blocks to be able to actually truly rehab that hamstring? It could be 2 weeks. Cole Kmet had a hamstring this week and he's playing, it could be 6, 7 weeks, just depending on the person. So, it also depends on what you're doing. If you're someone that is a long strider, if you're someone like maybe like who's going to be doing more of the fly routes, things of that nature, it's definitely a bit more of a concern. With an Equinemius St. Brown, he's right in that middle, right, where he still needs to be able to accelerate as a receiver, all that jazz, but he's not necessarily a burner. So my hope is that right after that 4-week time that he should be able to return with that hamstring.
At this point, his role in the offense is more like a glorified tight end. He's out there to block. He's an outstanding blocker, very physical at the point of attack. He's when you watch him do a stock block, he has like O-line technique where he's really got his hands in there really good. So it's fun watching him block. As it's kind of hard to say because he's a receiver, but that's kind of what it is. And I want to ask you about one more guy who's on IR now, but he's due to come off possibly after this next game because that'll be his 4 games, and that's Braxton Jones, starting left tackle. I thought he was playing really good early in the season before he got hurt. The penalties obviously were a problem. Right. He has to clean that up. It's a technique thing, so it wasn't like he was playing bad. He just had a few mistakes here and there. But Braxton Jones neck injury. Fans hear that, they're like, "Oh no, Tevin Jenkins had the neck, and he was out for a long time." We hear neck. Neck and back are nothing you want to mess with, but there was no surgery that we know of. Who knows with the Bears? They could have been a secret surgery happen at some point, but he's on IR for 4 weeks. They didn't make it sound like it was long term. So what are some things that it could possibly be where it is somewhere you can come off the IR here and after this next game?
Yeah, there's a collection of things it could be, right? I mean, you could be looking at something like a whiplash. I know you and I talked about that, I believe, the first week after it happened. That's going to be a little more muscular in nature. It could be something as big as a bulge disc, like a disc issue, which you're going to have that where it's called the annular fibers that are holding that disc in. They tear, you get a bit of a bulge, and what you end up getting is a lot of, first of all, pain, but also burning, numbness, tingling. You get sensation changes. And really the biggest thing in terms of just output is muscular weakness down the arm. Obviously kind of important as a lineman to be able to have your arm available to you. The thing that's interesting with that, though, is there's a study that they did. I love showing this to patients who come in with, hey, I have a disc, I have a this, I have a that, I have facet issues. That as you get older, the amount of disc issues, the amount of bulging disc, all that stuff, it gets more and more and more, but you may not have symptoms with it. So just because Braxton, if he does have a disc issue, that doesn't necessarily mean like, okay, he needs surgery or that it's a death sentence. As long as you can get the muscles around that disc to be strong enough, be flexible enough, as long as you get the upper back, that thoracic mobility to be what it needs to be, and as long as you get those symptoms to kind of, you could say, suck back or centralize back into just the neck, you're good to go. A lot of times, I mean, patients that I treat with disc issues, they're better in 4 or 5 weeks. So, and those are people who are coming in once, twice a week, not an NFL player who is hopefully getting treatment around the clock. So I would expect that if he didn't have surgery, which seems like he didn't, he should be back coming off IR this upcoming week.
I think we kind of talked a little bit with Tevin Jenkins when he had a neck injury. He discussed it in the offseason when he had a couple press conferences, the stuff he did specifically to target the neck muscles. He kind of changed his way he's preparing for football, partly because of his back and neck issues that he had in the past. And he talked about how he is confident that wouldn't be an issue moving forward. So Braxton Jones kind of in the same boat now. Like you said, it's been 4 weeks. He's probably getting, targeted, physical therapy to make sure he gets to take care of that area. So that's good for Jones, because I'm a fan of Braxton Jones. I like to see him play. I like his story. So I hope we can get out there, because Larry Borum's fine. I mean, he's an okay football player. There are some on social media that are ready to anoint him the next starter. Oh, he should be the guy going forward. He's fine. He's okay. He needs some help every now and again. He's a situational blocker where he's more going to get his body in the way of you. He's not looking to really, move you off the spot. He's wide, which kind of helps him in the passing game. But still, speed gets him, like it does a lot of tackles in the NFL. So I'm fine with Borum where he's at as your swing guy. He's a good football player for that. But Braxton Jones clearly the better football player. So let's jump into this actual injury report, because it's not quite as long as it was, because of course the two guys popped on IR. Bam, I got a graphic today. But it is pretty lengthy considering they're coming off a Thursday night game. And we're going to start on the top here, for you guys watching on Second City Gridiron. Kyler Gordon, broken hand. He did have surgery right after the injury against the Packers. He's back, whether he's playing with a club or not, depending on the severity. I don't expect much drop off from Kyler Gordon, unless, of course, he is wearing a big, bulky club where he can't catch the ball. But you're expecting Kyler Gordon to come in and just kind of build off the offseason he had?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, heard all these reports, and when I got to go to camp a couple times, I mean, he was one that was one of the top 3 guys consistently flashing. You mentioned playing with that club. We literally just had a linebacker playing in the NFL who didn't have a hand, and he got interceptions. So I think Kyler can pull that off.
That's a good point. I had to think about that. I'm excited for Gordon. Another thing, we talked about the offseason they had, and we expect him to be a big part of this the secondary. So let's just stay with the secondary. Eddie Jackson, he's questionable, but he has been limited this whole week. He's trending towards playing. I know when he's talked like he's going to play this week, but still, he didn't get a full practice in. He had the foot injury last year that put him on IR. There was no surgery. Could this foot injury have been related to the previous foot injury he had?
Yeah, I believe it was in fact the same foot that's keeping him out, if I recall correctly, based off of the film looking back at when he actually got injured. It's just one of those things sometimes where there's just lingering issues. Are players keeping up with all the movement patterns they're supposed to be doing? We already talked about there's nutritional things that go into this, yada yada yada. And sometimes at the end of the day, football is football, where even if you're 100% on one leg and 90% on the other, even just that 10% discrepancy with the amount of force, how fast these guys are moving, the power that they're moving with, that's enough to have an injury that pops up. It just seems like something that Eddie's going to have to manage just for the rest of his career. Not necessarily that he's going to get hurt every single year going forward, but just he has to be on top of it.
Yeah, so if Jackson can't go, then you're probably going to be Elijah Hicks or possibly Deron Harmon, the veteran they signed a couple weeks back. He didn't play last week because he had just signed, but so at least they have a veteran there behind Eddie, so that'll be nice at least. Staying on the secondary, Jalen Johnson, he is back this week. He is off the injury report. He did get in 2 full practices. Here we're talking hamstrings earlier. Here's another hamstring. He had a hamstring. It kept him out a few weeks, but now here he is a full go. So you don't expect any since he was full go 2 weeks in a row or 2 days in a row. You don't expect any lingering effects from that hamstring.
Shouldn't be. I mean, here's a perfect example. He only missed a couple of games with that hamstring. He didn't have to go on IR. So in theory, you're saying that the severity of that hamstring in the first place, not as bad, easier to rehab. So the chances of him re-aggravating it are less, but they're not 0, right?
Yeah.
It's something you still have to be conscientious of. And I know that there was a conversation originally before Terrell Smith, and we'll get to him, is no longer playing, of rotating him in. And there was always conversations, was it going to be with Tyreek Stevenson? Is it going to be with Jalen Johnson? There was, it's going to be with Kyler Gordon, but doesn't matter. Now it just spits out. So, maybe they had a snap count in mind for Jalen. We'll see. We'll see if he's at 100% or not.
Yeah, I mean, they have some options. The one thing is the Bears secondary, they had some injuries. So they had some guys that kind of come in and plug into play. You mentioned Terrell Smith. He was limited this week with an ankle. Then he was fine, good to go on Thursday. And then he got the unfortunate DNP because of an illness. I'm guessing an illness, they're already calling him out. We're thinking like a bad case of the flu, maybe COVID, who knows? But the fact that he's sick and they're already saying, hey, you know what, just stay home, rest up. That's probably the best way to go if someone has an illness like that with Smith. But it does suck because, man, he was playing some good football.
Yeah, and it goes back to the summer when there were these conversations where there were times where Terrell Smith was playing over a Tyreek Stevenson, and people were very excited about Tyreek Stevenson. So the fact that he was able to do that really speaks. I know that was something that I was saying back when he was drafted, was I truly felt that he fell way further than he should have. His earlier tape in his college career was better than the season right before he came out. And ultimately, I still believe he's Jalen Johnson insurance if a contract can't get worked out. So it's a shame, because this is now his second injury stint that has hurt his progression. And hopefully after this week, he can come back and really, there's a lot of football left this season. So hopefully we can see something out of him.
Yeah, let's bounce over to the offense again. Two more players are out for the Bears. We talked on briefly. Roschon Johnson is out with concussion symptoms. Travis Homer is out with hamstring issue. Neither player went to IR, so I guess that's the good news. But we talked about it, man. Deontay Foreman's going to be fine. He's a hammer. He doesn't have the explosiveness. He's not as effective in the passing game. But Darrington Evans, he's a shifty player. He's pretty good receiver out of the backfield. I mean, Bears fans know him. We saw him last year a little bit. He didn't get a lot of playing time, but the little bit we saw of him, we saw, okay, he's effective. We talk about all the time, and it's the running back position. These guys go through, a lot of players. They don't get the second contract. There are so many good tailbacks out there just that don't get chances. So I think the Bears are going to be fine here. You have no issues with let's real quick talk about the concussion. Lucas Patrick also has a concussion. He's questionable. I know you've talked about a lot of times, a lot of it is when they come out of the protocol. So I'm assuming Johnson's not out of concussion protocol. So Lucas Patrick was a full participant on Friday. Does that necessarily mean he's totally in the clear and he's out of concussion protocol? Or they let him do some things and they're still monitoring what's going on?
Right. The thing with those Friday practices is they are not as robust, right? I mean, you're not doing these big team sessions where there's contact and all that stuff. When you look at the normal progression in terms of what it should be in terms of return to play from pretty much every sport, I don't care if it's, high school level all the way through the pros, you need to be symptom-free for everyday activities. Then it's light aerobic activity, a treadmill walk, elliptical, things like that. Then moderate, trying to get the heart rate up. Maybe you're doing a Buffalo concussion treadmill test. Then heavy non-contact activity, practice full content, and then finally you're cleared. So if a Friday practice was, for the sake of argument, you weren't doing contact, maybe it was just heavy non-contact, then technically he is a full participant. Yeah. Does that mean that he is ready to take a hit? Not necessarily, but we could still lean towards more likely than not, considering he was full. They're confident that, as long as nothing weird pops up today or, before that game kicks off, that he will be available.
So they're looking for no more symptoms of the concussion. When he's back, he's working out, he's doing his thing. They do the test where they have, and if there's so the walkthroughs today on Saturday, no symptoms at all. He looks good, he feels good. Then there's possibly a chance he may play. And look, Lucas Patrick's your center. I mean, he's fine. Cody Whitehair moved over. That was their plan all along. So he's a reserve lineman we're talking about. If he can go, he can go. If he can, he can't. I don't think it's that big a deal. Plus, he's not really that level of play where you're like, oh my God, we're missing Lucas Patrick this week. I mean, it's fine. I do like having your same five guys always playing there, but that's still a week away, at least for the Bears. So big report this week. So you talk about those Thursday games. I've never been a fan. Part of it is because of the injury. It's just, to me, it's just too short of a game. I assume you're the same way. You're not a big fan of those Thursday night contests.
I mean, originally, I would say when I was more in college and I had a lot more free time on a Thursday night, I selfishly enjoyed it because more football, more better. But, as first of all, I've gotten busy because now I don't get home until like 7:30, so it's hard to catch them and I got to be up early. And so I barely get to finish them. But just from a more physical therapy, someone who cares about how the body works perspective, it's trash. It's one of those things where it's just not enough time to rehab. This is a very physical game, whether you're talking about the hits or you're talking about the load that the muscles have to undertake. The rehab time is short. The turnaround is short. These guys are back in the building. I mean, to give the Bears, for example, Cole Kmet talked about this on CHGO in terms of, even looking at film. They didn't even really watch film from the previous game because they don't have time. So, same thing with the body. You don't have time to go through your normal restorative process you normally would go through. And you're all of a sudden playing a game on Thursday. So, in terms of the dollars and cents, I get why the NFL wants it. In terms of watchability, I mean, look at the stupid Chiefs game against the Broncos. That game was trash.
That was bad. Yeah,
it just was bad. But we watch it because we're idiots that love football.
Football's king, man. They know it. If they have a game on every night of the week, fans would tune in and watch it, and they would make it work somehow. So, hey, Mason, I want to thank you again. Thanks for jumping on. I know it was kind of last minute for you, but so many injuries, man. I thought it was important to get out there and throw something out there real quick before the Bears kick off on Sunday. Speaking of which, Bears Vikings. Who you got?
I'm going to take the Bears.
Let's go.
It's the line, 2.5 points, not a lot. The Bears are it's short. It's a one game, but they're the upward trajectory. The Vikings are in this weird amorphous, like, are we tanking? Are we not? You don't have Justin Jefferson. Kirk Cousins loves to, I think he's averaging, I believe it's a 1.4 turnovers a game with 7 turnovers over the last 5 weeks. Their run game is trash. Their defense is very middle of the road. It's a very, very winnable game at home. And Justin's one of those guys that when he feels good, he plays good. And I think he's feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I was leaning towards Bears even before the Justin Jefferson news popped. Once they said he was out, I'm like, oh, yeah, dude, this is a Bears win. I'm pretty confident. I think pretty much the whole crew at WCG, we all picked the Vikings this week, or the Bears this week, I should say. So it's a good one. I mean, the Bears get right here this week, then it's the Raiders, and then that's another possible win. And all of a sudden the narrative is like, playoffs, baby. So it's there for it. It's funny how quickly things change. We went from such a sad first couple weeks of the season after such a high of the off season, and then just now we're back. We're like, okay, let's get a couple wins. That's all it really takes.
I hate, and I understand why they do it, but I hate when they put the Packers week 1 because it has such a heavy emphasis for fans. Definitely it seeps into Hallis Hall for players. I mean, I remember when I was playing football high school at Glenbrook North up in Northbrook. Every time we played Glenbrook South first week of the season, and we always came out feeling slow and skittish, and it set the tone for the rest of the season. You want almost like a warm-up game in a way, and the Bears never get that. They always get that funky, like, why are you throwing us in prime time? Why are you throwing us against the Packers? So it's all about the order of the schedule, right? If you had the Commanders game first, all of a sudden you have a different vibe for the whole season. So let's relax. Let's see how the entire season plays out.
I think there's a chance the Bears are going to be back in that. It's the NFC. So if you get 2 wins in a row and you're sitting at 3 wins, you are back in the playoff picture. Yeah. You are back in the playoff talk for that last seed because the NFC is top heavy. There's not really a lot of really, really good teams. You're just kind of a bunch of okay teams, and you get hot. Justin Fields gets hot. He keeps us going. Who knows what happens? But that's it. That's our time, Mason. I want to thank you again. Appreciate it. Until next time, bear down, my friends.